So one of the value propositions of knowledge management is that if you can get this knowledge spread around and use it, and you can do that for less than the benefit you're getting from it, then there's a very substantial return on investment. But now let me take it one step deeper. That's part of the benefit of sharing. Let me tell you the real benefit of sharing that I'm sure you can all relate to once you hear it. And that is, in Chennai, if I were to pass this to you, I know you're going to say, wait a second, that's not exactly how I understand it. This is my viewpoint. This is my vantage point. Let's talk about that a little while. In other words, there's stuff already in your head. And when you receive this little golf ball, it's not going into an empty head. It's going up against some already, for positive or negative, preconceived notions. Some existing knowledge, some existing opinions, some existing biases, whatever they are, that's in your head. And out of that conversation between you and I is going to evolve some more knowledge. So if you can see it, depending on the size of my screen here, you'll see I've added a little golden nugget to it. So when I have a conversation with Chennai, it's not just passing this golf ball into an empty vessel, pouring water into an empty vessel. It's passing it over to you, and you saying, wait a second, could you clarify that a little bit more? You know, that's not exactly what my experience has been. And that kind of conversation, that dialogue is going to result in the little golden nuggets. And Chennai, when you pass it to Bangalore, as this plus a golden nugget, Bangalore is going to push back on you a little bit. And out of that's going to come another golden nugget. So instead of taking one golf ball and passing it around 25 or 30 of you and having 25, a multiplier of 1 into 25, there's really going to be a much more dramatic multiplier, some brand new knowledge being created almost at every time it passes. I think you can appreciate what I'm talking about is the truth. You've heard the expression probably, you don't know something until you can teach it. Well, just in the process of trying to pass that around, I am learning about it myself. I'm creating some nuggets in my own head because I had to more clearly understand that concept if I was passing it on to Chennai. And it's that dialogue that takes place. The number 5 here, they're not aware of the benefits of sharing. If you have that deep understanding that knowledge can really be multiplied just by the simple act of sharing it, then what does that leave you with? It leaves you with the conclusion, also found out by the World Bank, that the people who are hoarding their knowledge are the least capable and competent of your folks. Now you understand why. The ones that are out sharing the knowledge are getting new nuggets all the time. If somebody hoards their knowledge 5 years later, how much knowledge do they have? Just that. If somebody's a knowledge sharer, tomorrow they have that much. And who knows in 5 years how much they're going to have. They're going to have a whole bucket of golden golf balls. You got the picture? Now, I don't know how I explain this in scientific terms. I think sometimes in a teaching environment, 2 golf balls is much better than scientific terms. We don't want to go back to the dendrites and all that stuff. We've had that. So this is something maybe you will remember. And that needs to be taught to folks. That there is a substantial benefit of sharing. And the benefit of sharing is not to just pass the knowledge around as they thought in the Middle Ages, but in fact to invent new knowledge at every passing. And when you invent new knowledge at every passing, the body of knowledge grows, the body of useful knowledge, and that's what I call a learning organization. So you want to encourage sharing. You want to keep from having people that just hoard their knowledge and encourage them to be sharers, because you tell them 5 years from now you'll be a much richer person for having shared that knowledge as opposed to just hoarding it. Now that goes back, I'm not going to go back to the slide, but the prior slide where we said we want people to move it from tacit over to explicit. They say, well, you're just sucking the knowledge out of my head. And you say, no, as a matter of fact, we're trying to get you to take that knowledge and share with others and codify some of it, and in those processes, you're actually enriching yourself. So 5 or 10 years from now, you will look like that compared to the person who just hoarded it will look just like that. That's all I have for this first session. I think I have a few more minutes, so I'm going to open up the first slide or two of the next session before we take our break. I have about 5 minutes. Well, maybe it's better then, since it's only 5 minutes, to ask you, are there any questions on what we've covered during the first hour of today's session? No questions.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you, yes. Who's talking?
We are from Hyderabad.
Ah, okay. I don't see you on my screen, but I can hear you. Oh, there I see you now. Okay, go ahead.
We are from Hyderabad. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Is it possible to quantify the benefits of knowledge sharing?
Absolutely. Um, and the best way probably to do that is to give case studies of companies that have done knowledge sharing and show the benefit. So I will tap into one of the things that's in the second section, and I'll address our attention to Ford Motor Company.
Okay, thank you.
Ford Motor Company started to do a knowledge sharing process. There's a couple of very important lessons from this, one of which is it can be big bucks if you do it right. Now, Ford Motor Company has claimed in public writings that they have saved the company $775 million over 5 years doing knowledge sharing across their assembly plants.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. British Petroleum saves $85 million a year doing some forms of knowledge sharing, which we'll call an after-action review. Now, some of you who are into the financial aspects of large companies would say, well, wait a second. $775 million on a company that's the size of Ford Motor Company, that doesn't seem like a lot of money. $85 million a year for it doesn't seem like a lot of money. $85 million a year for British Petroleum. I don't know what their revenues were this year with the price of oil, but it was up around $200 billion or more. What is $85 million a year to a company that takes in revenues of $200 billion? That's not the correct question to ask. The correct question to ask is $85 million savings on what investment? And if you can show the investment was only $1 or $2 million, then you calculate the return on investment. It's a very substantial one that any country or company in the world would love to have. In fact, in the last few minutes of this first session, before we take our break, let me go back to one thing that I should have mentioned earlier. Again, it's the difference between the industrial age and the knowledge age. Think of the industrial age as making a pen. In the industrial age, we spent considerable amount of money and effort to build the production process to where it made this pen very efficiently. We put all our time and energy. We went from steam engines and conveyor belts to robotics. Everybody got the picture of that? That was the industrial age. The evolution from 1600 to 1950 to 2000 was from steam engines and conveyor belts to robotics to make this pen as efficiently as we can make it. Now, there's a little side story to that, and that is, for instance, in the United States, with that continual drive to bring the cost of making this pen down, they started shipping manufacturing overseas. And when I first started teaching knowledge management overseas, I was teaching in Singapore. And the Singapore people were saying, oh, woe is us. All these factories used to come here from the United States, and now they're all going down to Malaysia, or up to Malaysia. The next week I was in Malaysia, and they're saying, woe is us. All the factories that used to come here from Singapore are now, all the factories that used to come here from the United States to Malaysia are now going to where? India and China. What is every country in the world or every company in the world trying to seek? The lowest cost of labor. Eventually we'll get to the point where there's no more that can be wrung out of the manufacturing of this thing based on labor. We've done everything we can, going from steam engines and conveyor belts, to make this as efficient a process as possible. So visualize this pen as something I could squeeze a little bit more out of. In the next 20 years, maybe we can squeeze some more out of it by shipping to India and China for manufacturing. Someday we'll go to Africa, I suppose. But eventually, in not more than 2 decades, we'll run out of going to use muscle power to do this. That's as low as we can go, because everything will be robotic by then anyway.